We just moved a light to be able to see birds, but now it's not. Look what that's done to. Sam is blinded by the light.
I am so white.
Absolutely.
Sam.
Yeah.
Wow. How are we going to fix this?
Yeah, we got to. Well,
Here we go. I'll move and start.
we're trying to scare birds away with the light, and then we're going to take the light away, or is this our defense
Or
against
should it be
birds?
turned?
So because the light.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
There you go,
okay,
yeah. Oh, it's.
All right. Yeah, I think we're good. All right, we'll be here.
Good luck. What is
Okay,
it?
No,
so
it's-
before
you're
we
not the one
begin,
posting on lakes.
Oh,
before we begin, I am going to be the one to make the very controversial decision to fuck around and find out the social consequences of posting this podcast onto that of the Lakes of Fire page, because those are our friends and that's our community. And yeah. Oh, I'm not a member yet, so I can't. All right, looks like we figured it out. All right, either somebody else is going to take that social risk, or we are not going to post a podcast about money onto that of a regional Burning Man event.
Oh, what the fuck?
Just cancel the volume there. All right. Some decisions make themselves. That's fine.
You're brave.
However,
You're a brave person.
I invite anybody who is listening to share this into the Lakes of Fire community, popular social networking platform that is also controversial in its ways it makes money. Are we ready to go?
let's go.
We're ready.
All right. Welcome to the PARADIALECTIC podcast, where myself, a nonsense man, and Eric Miller, PhD, clinical therapist, have conversations about controversial issues and topics, where instead of the thing that you hear a lot, which is somebody trying to tell you what they think and trying to help you understand why you should think what they think, we're trying to figure out what each other think about something and all get smarter and deepen our understanding about something. And today, the controversial topic is that of money, finance. And this is particularly controversial for this round-ish table. This is totally a dick shaped table.
Dick keyhole.
Yeah. For this, what could be called is we used to refer to in high school as a sausage party of intellects. It's particularly controversial for this group to be talking about money, because we are all members and enthusiasts, advocates. We all do Burning Man culture, Burning Man community stuff. And one of the principles of Burning Man is don't money if you can help it.
But ironically, it takes a tremendous amount of money to not money while you're actually at Burning Man.
I've noticed that. I've had that brought into verbal space. There's been folks saying that out loud lately.
Right. So indeed, this is quite the paradox and the dialectic. And I think this is kind of what we're talking about, because a lot of our friends too, in various ways, feel that there's something wrong with money, that we shouldn't have money, that it'd be good if society didn't have it. And in fact, that socialism and communism, things that I actually embrace a lot more now than I used to when I was more libertarian when I was younger. But at the same time, I also now understand the sheer importance of being able to understand the energy of money, because it's that energy that allows you to do a lot of other things in life. It allows you to create badass art, and it also allows you to have a degree of security and to do good things for other human beings. So a big reason that I wanted to have all of these people here is each one has kind of worked with and kind of mastered money while still being within this kind of creative group. They've done it in different ways. And one of the things that's been most important to me is I really wish that I understood money sooner. And more than that, I wish I invested money, whether it was in an additional businesses to the ones that I've run in the past, or into my savings much younger when I was poor and didn't have money. Because right now I need to play catch up in a big way, and we'll get to that. So really quickly, I'm going to do a broad overview of some of the topics we're going to touch on. And then depending on what the audience is interested in, so please let us know, we will spin some of these other topics off. And these are going to include things like basic finance. And I want to say up front that none of us are financial advisors. None of this is financial advice except to learn about basic finance. And
I'm not even financially literate. So when you say the audience, I am the audience. And I have been deputized to say, stop. What the fuck are you talking about? If things get too complex, I don't understand anything. I have a lot to potentially gain from this, but I'm ready.
So Zach, you're saying invest in Beanie Babies right now. That's the way to go.
I was thinking more pet rock. Yeah.
Okay. So, and this is the big thing. So what does it mean to invest? Why should you invest? And what when can you invest? And another reason why we're doing this now is something that, as I've come to learn more about the larger economy, a little more about money, and a little more about what the hell is happening with the government and stock market right now. That's something that, even though, right, economists, whether they're running hedge funds, whether they're financial advisors, whether they are like genius billionaires, that everybody seems confused, but most people believe that something really bad is going to happen economically somewhere between 3 months and a year and a half from now, because things have been going really well for a long time, that stocks are still going up, even though we have a pandemic, even though the economy is in shambles, even though most of the people that you and I know aren't working or they're concerned about their stability. But, well, I guess Tesla's gone down just a little bit in the last few days, but it was going up like a rocket before then. So what the hell's going on? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about what it means to start a business. We got a couple of people here who did so, and did so in very different ways. And then we're also going to talk about what got me into understanding finance in a new way. And we're going to touch on just a little bit Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. But each of these, we're going to just a little touch. And we're going to find out what you're interested in. We might spin this off again. So,
as a I'll also serve as representative of the Liberati by just putting a thing in there that things have been going well for some of us, and and we would one of our missions would be to invite others to potentially become financial literate. Like, that's why I'm here listening, and that's what I'm trying to get at. Is I've just noticed that there's a lot of morality and philosophy talk amongst fellow artists and folks in our community, and I still keep waking up into the same reality world game where even if my goal was to end money, it would probably be good for me to understand money and get some. It's probably being wealthy might help me end money as we know it. So I wanted to begin with a question.
So first, maybe introductions.
Oh yeah, who are you? Who is everybody? First of all, before I ask you what is money, who are you, Jeff Dude Wolf?
Well, my name's Jeff. I'm a relatively simple, relatively uneducated person from Lansing, Michigan, and I have started and currently run many businesses. My primary business is real estate development, which encompasses all kinds of different things. So we I got my start, enrolled in college at a community college, almost immediately dropped out, and went to Barnes & Noble, who at the time sold books. And rather than spending a bunch of money on tuition, spent, I think, $2,400 on books in the real estate section. I said, this is a really pragmatic way to attack something, right? For some reason, the first book that I read out of those $2,400 worth of books was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that was probably the luckiest thing I ever did. If I hadn't read that book that early in my life, I definitely would not be where I am today. Because typically creation of wealth takes a long time if you do it through most traditional avenues. So I kind of took those principles, combined those principles with basic understanding of how real estate works and basic understanding of how other businesses work. And now, I mean, we started working on $5,000, $10,000 projects. Now I work on $5, $10 million projects every day. So that's what my life looks like, and that's in a nutshell how I got there. It's obviously there's a lot more to that, but that's a little synopsis.
And real quick, what has that allowed you to do? Because I know that you're heavily involved with the Michigan Burning Man community, and some people know that. But for those who don't, what is that having these resources allowed you to do?
Well, one thing it did for me, programmed since birth that money is a thing that's scarce and very powerful and potentially evil and potentially great. But what I really latched onto is that I kind of changed the word money in my head to capital to try to reprogram myself, which I think was a really important distinction that I made. It's a silly little semantic thing, but it can have a profound impact. So, and then I kind of adopted this little mantra that it is energy. So to try to disconnect myself and disassociate it with it and its effects. And when I did that, and then I realized that capital is just energy, it made it very easy to attract it or see it everywhere in the world. And the things that I'm interested in, I mean, I like Lamborghinis, but it doesn't that's not what I stay up at night thinking about or dreaming
That's
about.
an Italian dish, right?
Yeah, it's pasta. It's best best served with it. You need the right sauce, but
Lamborghini Alfredo.
but no, I stuff like that's cool. But what really gets me going is art. I'm also an artist. That's what I was, an artist way before I was a business person. Since a very young age, I've been interested in music and sculpture, and large scale art is really like the thing that I love the most and don't do enough of. And go to Burning Man, look around.
Right.
Those things are expensive.
They do cost a little bit.
So how do you get there, right? And there's a lot of really easy ways to do that. And it seems impossible looking at something and saying, oh my God, that would cost me $100,000 in raw materials. But, just a couple of years ago, we were sitting around and we said, hey, let's build a thing like an art card and do something on a napkin. And we're like, oh, that might cost like, I don't know, $50,000, $100,000. We made a couple phone calls and we're like, yeah, cool. I'll drop the money off tomorrow. And next thing you know, we built this thing. And it's this. So having an understanding of what money, or in my case, capital is and what its potential is, it allows for a different way to play in the world. Because most of my friends are very liberal people, very rooted in this idea that money is evil and that people with money are evil. And I look around and I see that belief kind of shackle them to a thing that I'm unshackled from. Of course, that doesn't come without its own costs. I certainly have other costs that are associated with that, but I see it from a different perspective. And in that, so it's nice for me to hang out with my friends that are completely opposite of me from a philosophical perspective, and try to help bridge those gaps. And I always am trying to help people realize their potentials.
Are you suggesting that people who think different things about the world can share space and have friendships?
That is
Craziness.
one of
so
my
not in right now.
primary human theses that I've been trying to push for the past year, and it's really difficult in the world that we're living in right now.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think you just gotta just do it. That's a slogan. Sam.
Hi,
Who the fuck are you?
my name is Sam, and I live outside of Ann Arbor, and I am a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm also an investor. But I wasn't always these things. I used to just be a guy with a job, and I've always had a interest in money and wealth, because I came from a lower middle class family, and I started to see money as basically as security. When I was in my teens, my grandfather had a stroke, and he had spent the last 10 years of his life in a nursing home. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to end up that way. Whatever happens, I'm going to figure out a different path. But so in my 20s, I graduated from college, and I got a normal job. It didn't pay a lot of money. But I started several side businesses. I saved a lot. I started investing. And over time, I understood a lot of the stuff that I didn't learn from a book. I actually never read the book that Jeff mentioned, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, until this year. And I can actually say now, looking back on it, it's funny because most of the stuff in that book is true, or at least the things that I've learned independently. So now that I've experienced financial independence and a different level of life, or freedom and security, which is what money is to me, I'm super passionate about helping other people learn, because I think we have a major deficit of financial literacy in this country. I think that schools don't teach this stuff, and most people have misconceptions. Most people think of things in a certain way, and if they could learn to look at it a different way, they would have more success around these things. And the thing about money is we're all playing this game whether we want to or not. Like, we're all interacting, whether we improve those skills, if we improve our financial habits, or if we don't, we're still in this game. And those habits that we have compound over time. Most people are either getting richer or they're getting poorer and taking on debt, because even if they're getting raises at work, or they're making the same amount of money or a little bit more money, inflation, their ability to buy things is going down as things get more expensive.
Yeah. So inflation, you just described it, but dive into that a little bit, because we're gonna touch on that again.
So back in the day, $1 bought a lot more than it does now. In fact, our money used to be linked to precious metals, and every year our money buys a little bit less. every year, a couple percent is lost effectively to inflation. So if something costs $1 in 2020, then maybe in 2021 it costs $1.03. In 2022 it costs $1.06. And over time, if you don't invest your money, if you don't grow your money more than it's losing its value from inflation, if you just stick it in a mattress in your bed, it has lower and lower and lower purchasing power. So it's not enough to just save. Once you get yourself out of debt, you have to then make more money than inflation to start the snowball rolling the other way. We're actually getting wealthier instead of poorer or in debt. So yeah, people, I just want to say this one more time. We don't have the best financial education in this country. We don't teach personal finance in schools, and it really can make a big difference in people's life in terms of their influence, their security, and their personal freedom as they get better with these skills.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to say that a lot of people that I care about deeply, and I don't think are stupid or ill-willed at all, are so emotionally, philosophically invested in the idea that we got to burn this shit down as soon as possible, and that's the only way that that we will all flourish, or that we can all get to a place of relative equity. And I'm here as one who thought that for a series of years, and saw myself unable to affect less. I was able to affect less kindness in the world, and my life looked less like how I would, what I would wish to be able to do in terms of output. So I invite others, if you've been feeling that way, to just to like accept the game we're playing, just to the point where you and your community may be able to benefit from these things. And now I ask Corey, what's your relationship with money?
Well, I grew up not being able to pursue a lot of hobbies that I would have otherwise, or a lot of my interests. So I was very constrained to things that don't cost money. And that led me to the natural path of getting a degree, choosing one that would support me in a decent enough manner so that I could pursue my other interests. Since money really is a way for you to pursue your other hobbies, at least the way I like to look at it, is that I should be funding my other passions with whatever I can tolerate in the short term. That was my early on progression. From there, I started jumping from startup to startup as a software engineer, looking to understand sort of how businesses got up and running. And I would jump at different stages, maybe a 20-person company, 100-person company, and the same time trying to accumulate some amount of wealth. That led me to discovering cryptocurrencies in around 2017. I originally discovered them when they first started, when you could mine it on a laptop in a night and get 50 Bitcoin. I remember at the time thinking, this is too much work. I can't figure it out. Fuck it. Well, 2017, I wasn't going to let that pass me up again. Seeing a thriving ecosystem with, a lot going on, it made me realize this isn't going away. And seeing a currency come about, I started talking to people about it, which is when I first introduced it to Brick. And then me and him have dove into that ever since. And that's kind of been from that point where I've grown an interest in finance, investing, and any way to grow money so that I can buy back our most valuable resource, which is our time. Mm-hmm. And effectively, money should be doing that for both you and anybody you care about, because that's a resource that you can't get more of, and you're limited to the amount you have. And it's an amount that you don't know how much you have either.
Yeah.
Very much so. And so that kind of brings it back to me, is that I actually came across Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, when I was a teenager. And I was in my early 20s, and I actually was a libertarian at the time. And I was helping my father run a martial arts studio. I ended up taking that martial arts studio over. I had another business. But the challenge was I was putting so much time and effort into my business that I wasn't taking time to save any of that money. And then after I injured myself and decided to go back to my first passion, which was, well, I got distracted by a year of law school, which in itself is an expensive lesson. But then I ended up going back to my first passion, which is psychology. And then I had 7 years of grad school, and all the savings that I had from this job that I loved went away. And so luckily, in pursuing a PhD, I did it in something that pays an okay wage, but I started to realize very quickly that I was way behind the curve of where I need to be in order to have enough money to comfortably retire, let alone have financial freedom right now. And so it was really good when I came across Corey and he told me about Bitcoin, which I discovered back in 2011 when it was $30. And he goes, I'm like, well, how much is it now, Corey? He's like, 3,000. I'm like, holy shit. And they told me about some of these other coins, these other cryptocurrencies that came up. And I started to realize that there were things possible with this form of programmable money that you could invest in that most people were not realizing. And I'd known from other experiences in my life, it's where you spot opportunity that other people don't, that you have the possibility for outsized gains, outsized rewards. And
I don't know what the fuck outsized that means, man.
So outsized gains means that right now, it's very hard to make money in, say, if you put money in a savings account. Back in the day, how much could you get when you put, how much interest? So you'd earn money on your money if you put money in the bank. How many percentage points could you earn 30 years ago?
Well, in the early 2000s, I opened up an Immigrant Direct account online. It was an online bank, and I remember getting 5%.
Yeah,
and I
5,
checked
even
yesterday,
8 sometimes.
Right.
and most of mine are paying now 0.5%.
Right.
So you can't. That's what I was saying about you can't save money and hope to beat inflation.
Right.
Even if you get paid this small percentage, it will be worth less and less each year. So you have to learn how to invest. But if you're in a lot of debt, you want to pay off your debt first because that's a guaranteed return. So
Yes.
a lot of people listening probably are coming from a place where they have some debt and they're saying, what investment should I do? What should I do with money? And it's good to learn about investments, but it's also really powerful to pay off your debt because that's guaranteed. You know which percentage. If you have credit card debt and it's 12%, then that's a better gain than you're going to get in most traditional investments.
So I think there's maybe a concept that we need to touch on first because it works. This is something that can work for you or against you. And this is this concept of compound interest. And this is one of the, Benjamin Franklin said that compound interest is, or maybe Albert Einstein said that compound interest is one of the most powerful forces in the world. And if you are by a computer right now, don't shut us off, but open up another tab. And at some point during this podcast, look up compound interest calculator. And what this does is if you put away a certain amount of money per month and you're earning 5 to 10% interest, you can play with those numbers and you save that money for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, play with those numbers in the calculator and see how big that number gets every time you add 10 years to that. And what you might find is if you're putting away $500 a month, over a period of 30 years, you can end up with over $1,700,000. I think it might be even more than that if he's getting 10% interest per month. But
per year,
yes, it'd be nice. You can sometimes get that in crypto, which is why crypto can be so nice and so dangerous. We'll talk about that. It's dangerous. Don't just jump into it. But the other point here is it works in the opposite way. And this is why credit card debt is so dangerous. Because if you're making 3% in your savings account, which you can't even make that anymore. It's 1%. But you have $10,000 in credit card debt and you're giving the credit card compounding interest of 25% every year. You are getting exponentially poorer and you are the person making those capitalists richer. So if you want to bring down capitalism, don't have debt. That's the fastest way to fight the capitalist system, is to end up winning for yourself instead of winning for other people. Do other people have some ideas on compound interest or things you'd like to say?
Well, I'd like to step in there real quick. You said don't have debt. And I think that's a really dangerous statement.
Correct.
don't have
right.
credit card debt.
Don't have pointless debt that has too high of an interest rate. Thank you for that caveat.
So I'm going to try to not blow this up too quickly, but one of my mentors, it took me about a year to sink in, but the one thing that he really left me with was his primary thing that he was looking for in his investment thesis was exposure. And what exposure, I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And it literally took a year to sink in. And what he meant by that is the most possible debt and the most possible risk. And this is for a bunch of different reasons, but the way that the system is designed, he also told me something one time, which was, if you borrow a little bit and you don't pay the bank, you're in trouble. But if you borrow a lot, you don't pay the bank, they're in trouble. so he was always trying to do the biggest possible deals. And I'm talking, like 9-figure deals, big, maybe 10-figure deals, because what happens is when all of the other things that you're trying to describe, when inflation occurs and you have debt, the value of your debt gets reduced, right? So when the compound interest happens, if you're reinvesting that money, whether it be through any kind of financial tool, if you're experiencing that, the more exposure you have, obviously, the more ability you have to do that. So I think it's really dangerous just to say don't have debt. In fact, I've personally used debt, even high interest debt, to put into arbitrage situations. Interrupt me and say, what's arbitrage?
Oh, there's been a bunch of things being said where I don't know what the fuck that word means.
So
but
let's make a distinction here. And I think the point that you made is an excellent one.
Yeah.
Don't have pointless consumer debt.
Yes.
But if you are having debt with the purpose of investing in a solid plan, this is what allows you to get something that in whether it's leverage or investment or business, people call leverage. And if you can make smart bets with other people's money, this is how you can very much increase your own money.
Exactly. It's also extremely risky. It's way more risky, but what's the downside? You're poor or you're more poor.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
Exactly.
This is a common scenario. You're at zero or you have debt, you're in the red, and there's a party, and we're at reality. We're not sure if there will be a nuclear Armageddon tomorrow. Things are looking dodgy, and you've got 6 friends. 3 of them really like cocaine and ketamine, and Venmo exists, and my Venmo is attached to my bank account, and it's like, why? Why not? So you're saying because that would be consumer debt, right? That wouldn't help.
I definitely wouldn't typically recommend going into consumer debt to do cocaine or ketamine.
Well, so
what about mixing them both together? The idea, the thing is, if you wanted to impart to somebody who has been operating financially illiterately, which is a lot of us, I would like to help us articulate why to have that starting brick of building that foundation, because I want to understand these concepts you're talking about.
Thank you for that plug, by the way.
But I haven't
Brick.
yet been. Oh, thank you. Eric Miller also goes by Brick. I feel like a lot of us need a lot of verbal coaxing as to why we shouldn't make the effort to understand these things that sound like Aramaic to us now.
So I have an interesting example of this that I've thought about. So say you want to buy a really nice, say you want to buy a really nice, a really nice purse, and you're thinking about spending $400 in this Coach bag, right? But you're going to put it on your credit card, and you're just going to pay interest on it. It's not going to cost you $400. It's going to, if you don't ever pay off the debt, it's going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars for this bag. Okay. Say you take the same $400 and you invest it. Well, now you earn thousands and thousands of dollars over time. So maybe you just buy a cheaper bag.
The $40 fake one looks great.
Right. You buy the $40 fake bag, you take the $360 and you invest it. So that bag doesn't cost you $400. It either costs you, if you can't pay it off because you put it on a credit card, thousands of dollars, or it earns you thousands of dollars because you take that money and you do something else with it. So things don't actually cost you what you think they cost you. They cost you this expected outcome one way or another.
Yeah.
So this was one of the most amazing things when I started. So Corey and I started getting into and working with cryptocurrency really early in 2017, and going through the end of 2017 and 2018 is when Bitcoin went from $3,000 to $20,000.
It never hit 20.
Yeah,
I had a hard sell on it. 20.
And
That would have been the best
some
day of my life.
exchanges it did, but it got really close to 20, and that. What was really interesting is when I saw the $100 or the $300 or the $1,000 I put in becoming 3 times, 4 times, 5 times that, I started to realize, wait a minute, I could buy this other thing off of Amazon, or I could go on this trip where instead of camping, I was in a hotel. And I'm like, why would I do that? Why would I do that when I can put this money somewhere else where it's going to make so much money? And crypto for me was to finance what Ashtanga yoga was to meditation. So when I was young, I was super hyper. My brain went way too fast. I tried to meditate.
That's me now.
It was just annoying. Yeah, this I think where a lot of our friends start. And now I teach meditation to Marines with PTSD. And the reason why I was able to get to that point is because Ashtanga yoga was so fast and so interesting that it allowed me to like it matched the speed of my brain, and it got me interested, and then it allowed me to slow down. And the really powerful thing about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is it moves so much faster. And because of that, it's so much more dangerous if you don't know what you're doing than regular finance. And as Bitcoin crested and peaked, and I believe it's about to kind of go back up again, in the downtime when Bitcoin was kind of languishing, I started to realize that book I read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, again, a really good place to start your financial education, was something that I could go back to. And I started to learn more about basic finance, and I started to realize I was way behind in my retirement and I needed to catch up. And so that's what got me studying. And if there's one thing I think all of us can agree on, that if you take something from today's podcast, is to start looking into your own financial education. And whether it's talking to your friends who have done well for themselves, or just getting a personal finance for dummies book or Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that if you can get yourself interested, you can play around, and you begin to find that making money for yourself can be interesting and fun, it's a game changer. What's that been like for each of you? Have you found a certain point where this became interesting for you, and how did you find that?
Yeah, first, I'd love to point out a phenomenon that happened to you that is something that I often tell people that haven't really got into the world of finance at all, which is, in my opinion, if you're starting at zero, if you just have a job and you go punch the clock and you leave and you have zero at the end of your bank account, well, zero in your bank account, not zeros at the end of your bank account, every month, any investing is good investing. And the reason I think that is because, like you, it ignites a bit of personal interest. Someone's self-interest is the most powerful thing that they have, right? So it ignites that in you, and you say, oh, wow, okay, that's interesting. Even if you lose, you're paying attention and you're participating, right? So not participating in the game that we're all forced to play every day, it's impossible to win. You're never going to get anywhere. I mean, so even if it's Robinhood, which is, totally inexperienced people getting on and buying stocks they don't know anything about, I still think that's better than putting cocaine and ketamine on your credit card.
You're forced to, well, okay, I could make that more moralistic. Mushrooms. Okay.
Well, then you might learn something.
Mushrooms, pharmawaska. I gotta say about that you're forced to play.
Yeah.
I'm not a stupid person, and a lot of the people who go through life with this, I'm not gonna play that game. It's not always stupidity. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's straight up ignorance, and you're being a brat. But you have, okay, so you can get your experience to feel like you're not playing the money game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Now, to the metric, and from those who are observing, like, if episode of Black Mirror where everybody has like the, the like economy, like if everybody was walking around and you had their number above you, this person has a red 4036 and this person has a green, and we were all like, you're playing the game in the sense that you are a winner or a loser by this metric. But I will say, in defense of those who are committed to not moneying, just to push back, like, I have had swaths of time in my life where it's like that shit, isn't weighing so much on it isn't taking up so much of my time and my consciousness. But I've been brought to the point now where, yeah.
So that's very important. So I see that happen. And in my opinion, it's a spectrum. Where everything is a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much. So there's two ways to get out of the trap, right? And you got to be on one side. So I meet people, I know people, I have good friends that, one of my best friends didn't own shoes until he was 10. You know what I mean? He's probably just as happier than I am.
Mm-hmm.
He's found a way to live his life where he doesn't care about material objects at all, and has really become an expert in living in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he lives in a place that's possible, and that's not Detroit, Michigan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there is happiness, and maybe more happiness on that end of the spectrum than the other one. But if you're gonna play this game and you're gonna live in this neighborhood and you're gonna do this thing, it's very, very hard to achieve that.
Yeah. And there's this factor that I see a lot where, if like in this community right now, there's somebody in every friends group or several who's like, oh, this is the financially literal one. This is the one who has money. And what ends up happening is they end up being mommy daddy or non-gender specific, like they are the provider for a friends group. And it's like, this isn't really fair that this person has to take the burden of having their head in this game and then their time thinking about it. So that's one of the factors that has brought me to this point now of like, I want to sit at this table, and I really do want to try to listen and learn, because it's become a pragmatic and a kind of ethical thing for me, is like, I could do so much more in this world.
And you said game, which is also a really a really important thing to me when I think about capital, right? If you know about game theory, you know, most of the folks that I know, especially in our community, when I read a Facebook post or hear a little verbal jab somewhere, I hear behind that they believe that capitalism in general, and I'm not here in defense of capitalism, let's be very clear, but it has done some great things, done some terrible things. But I hear when they talk about it in general, they believe that it is a zero-sum game. So the distinction between a zero-sum game and other game types, which there are a multitude of, is that in a zero-sum game, there is a clear winner and a clear loser, right? And in other types of game theory, there can be multiple winners and multiple losers, or potentially everybody wins, you know, just from whatever, you know, design of that it is. And I don't believe capitalism to be a zero-sum game, you know. I've noticed one thing about surrounding myself with people that have figured that game out pretty well, is that they're pretty much team players. They don't like being alone at the top because it can be real lonely. So those folks try to look around and pick people up around them that they see something in, and try to nurture that and try to help them elevate to a level where they, you know, are more free, more on the side of the spectrum where they're able to go on a fancy ski trip with them, or on a, you know, to get in an airplane and go, you know, climb Everest or do something, right? So because if you don't have the resources to do that, it's not easy, right? If you're trying to live in the land where money means nothing to you, you know, traveling to Everest and achieving that is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So using game theory and doing some reading on game theory. So I've read a few books on it, and they're pretty boring, but about understanding different types of games can really, money is a game, capitalism is a game, communism is a game, socialism is a game. It's all a system that we agree as humans we're going to participate in. And I find looking at it as a game as a very a way to objectify it and not get personally and emotionally attached to it, which allows me to be more successful in it.
However, in this situation, there are losers who are suffering immensely, and that's the thing that's always in my mind when I think about. I mean, well, one thing that I've noticed is if you have political aspirations, like particularly if you want to do away with capitalism, it's like it's going to help you to get some capital here.
So all the best James Bond villains who wanted to bring down capitalism were fucking rich.
Yeah.
So I want to say,
okay, yeah, real quick, yeah, go ahead, Sam.
So this point about it not being a zero-sum game, some people think that wealth is just a pie. It's just a big circle, and for me to have more, you have to have less. But that's not actually how wealth works. And I have a really good example for this. If you had a broken down car in your backyard and you went back there and you fixed that car up, you made it really nice, you've increased the amount of wealth in the world because there's one more nice car in the world. If you were in a tech company and you made a major innovation, you created Google and you created this search that let anybody get any information immediately, you've increased, or your Amazon, and you've made it so anybody can have anything that they want to their house in 2 days for relatively inexpensively. You've increased the amount of wealth in the world through that innovation. So wealth is a pie that we grow. It's not just now wealth inequality is a problem, because if you don't have a baseline level of care for everybody, if you don't have certain things as citizens, like if you don't have health care, if you can't meet your basic needs, and that's not a society that anybody wants to win in. And we got to make sure that we take care of everyone. Capitalism's got to be paired with this. This is what I believe. Capitalism's got to be paired with a strong social safety net and a strong social democracy. Otherwise, power tends to consolidate, and power starts to try to write its own laws, and power tries to do all these kind of things. So to have a balanced system, you have to have all these things, but that doesn't mean by itself that capitalism or wealth is bad. It's just a game that we're all playing. It's just a system. And as you get better at playing that game, you can affect more change. You can affect different outcomes.
And I have something to say before kind of passing this over to Corey. So going back to the exchange between Zach and Jeff, it's not an either or. You don't have to escape or be in it. Like, everybody has money exchange, even if it's only like you're helping that guy build his yurt and he's helping you like grow your hemp. Like it's still an exchange of energy, right? Money is nothing except for a simple way to exchange that energy between people.
Metric.
And here's the thing. If you don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about investing, I don't want to get too deep into investing. We might do another thing on it. But one of the simplest ways to do it is to get a series of Vanguard index funds where they don't charge a large fee. You put a small amount of money in there, and you have a diverse, like four or five different key index funds. And again, you can look this up online. It's very easy to do. You put a reasonable amount of that money in there every month. Even if you're spending it on living expenses, you can put $50 in there. And over a period of years, you are going to grow that wealth pretty dramatically. And if I had done that 20 years ago, I would be in a very different place now. And it would not have really taken away from the lifestyle I was living, because I was doing what I loved. I was teaching martial arts. I was building crazy Burning Man projects. I was throwing group events where I was losing money in every major art project I did. I could have still put $50 away a month and would have made a big difference in my life. So I'm going to pass it over to Corey.
I was going to agree with Sam that there is also a responsibility of those that have more to provide for those that have less. It's part of a responsibility of having access to that amount of wealth. And I think that's something even on a smaller level, right? You do it in friends you have, right? If you have more than them, where Zach was saying the onus falls on them to help everyone else or to help your friends that have less. But even in that scenario, if you can, why not? That's part of being better at the game. That's part of winning the game. That's in I guess with winning too, I keep having a problem with, we keep saying winning the game, but you set your win conditions. And I think you had said you had a friend that, you know, moved to a place where his win conditions didn't involve this at all. And that's perfectly fine. And your win conditions should really be whatever allow you to support the lifestyle you want to live. And there's no reason you shouldn't learn how to use what's around you to get to those win conditions.
Now, you said I got a responsibility if I win the game to share the, because you mean an ethical responsibility? Because I sure as fuck don't have a legal one, and I will. And if you come for my gun, you're gonna have to pull it from my cold dead dick. So wait.
So I'd like to give an example. So there's someone in the community who's now in New Zealand doing some crazy stuff out there, and he is Nuri. And I think Jessica might be listening to this right now. But one thing he said to me is like, I'm not an artist. Like what I do is I don't create with my hands, but I have extra resources and I love what the people in my community do. So the way that I can contribute is by contributing monetarily to projects that I believe in. And that was how he backs that art. And that was his joy. That was his win condition. And so that's one of the beautiful things about understanding this is that whether, like for me, when I was 12 years old, I kept giving to wolf charities, like part of my allowance. My mom's like, why do you give to wolves? Like, why don't you give to people? I'm like, Mom, everybody gives to people. Who gives to wolves? Like that was my win condition. So that's the great thing about having these resources. You can vote with your dollars, and that's important.
I've got a really fundamental question that we probably should have asked first. But what is money?
Yeah. Can I ask that after I say one thing about, because we got into the capitalism thing? It seems so obvious to me that our solution here is that capitalism just needs caps, and just like, and I'm gonna be liberal here and say 100 billion. After you have $100 billion in net worth, then your net worth starts actually being trickled upon the rest of us with the universal basic income.
It's a good idea, but it can't work because people have airplanes.
I like the idea that you get 999 million, then after that you get a plaque that says you won capitalism and you get a parking lot. Yeah,
but it's like we're in this game now where people identify so intensely with their team left or team right that I want to make it. I'll meet you at 30 billion, so that doesn't strike somebody as the end of what freed civilization, because a lot of people identify with capitalism as that. Like that is what allowed.
So here's the thing. We can say that all day long, but none of us here and none of our friends are going to put a cap on capitalism. But what we can do is we can help our friends become educated about money.
Some of them. There is also a thing called having a special brain that is not going to wrap its coils around this.
No, I don't think so. I think, again, there's dozens of ways, there's thousands of wrong ways to do something, and there's dozens of right ways to do something.
You really think that every brain could understand investment and finance?
No, I think every brain can know that I can put $50 into a life cycle fund in Vanguard a month. So it's what's called a life cycle fund, where you put it in, and it automatically diversifies that $50 among 5 funds. It rebalances them, so when one fund goes up too high, it takes money from that and puts it into the other funds, and it grows your wealth over time without having to think about it. And all you have to know to do is put that money away and not touch it and let it sit there. And if you know a little more and you know to do it through a Roth or IRA. I'm thinking of the Irish revolution now. Belfast confetti, car bombs, all that stuff. But you put that away and you let it sit, and you do it in a tax deferred way through a Roth IRA, then you end up with a great deal of money down the road. If you have an emergency, you might be able to draw some from it with a penalty, and you're doing okay. You don't need to be able to master put and call options and using margin trading and all this other crazy stuff. You don't need to be Daddy Warbucks. You just have to have a basic safety net for yourself.
I mean, I believe that I could get to the point where I understand these things in order to enough to be functional, but every brain, I mean, it's like true creativity. I keep finding that it's rarer than we thought.
So your comment on, basically the jargon seeming Aramaic, that it's hard to understand. It's specifically made that way to disincentivize people to participate. Once you are able to parse that, it's incredibly simplistic. And I think that's kind of what Brick was getting at, is that anybody can learn it as long as you can learn to parse the language. And the language is meant to block us and to confuse us.
I like what you're saying. I want to help increase that signal in the world. But you said anybody, and I will remind you that every time you make a generalization, you are always wrong.
Anybody who wants to can learn this. Anybody who wants to can learn to put away $50. Here's the thing. And again, yes, maybe there's 1% of 1% who cannot, and then their guardian can. But the point here is most of our listeners can get the fundamentals of this pretty easily.
I would agree with that.
And again, the simplest place to go, if you go nowhere else, go to NerdWallet, go to there's a samurai guy. Doesn't matter. If you go to get Personal Finance for Dummies, really easy, really good, gives you the basics. Get a Vanguard fund. That's all you need. Okay.
But that's a lot less fun than talking about taking down the billionaires.
It is. It is so much. It's so much fun. Then you can have the battle with other billionaires too. You can take on Jeff Bezos in a death match.
Who's buying all these guillotines? Who's funding them? Who's going to do upkeep, maintenance on the guillotines when they get rusted over with billionaire blood? What are we going to do?
You could probably do all of them with one, but it still wouldn't solve the problem. Because taxation, I see it every day in my feed. I mean, there shouldn't be billionaires constantly. All my friends, all of them, most of them. I just think it's a misdirected use of energy. I mean, I agree that's way too much money. Nobody needs that much money. But I also know that those people have jets and that there are hundreds of other jurisdictions that will happily accept them as a citizen. So the second you say you can't have more than $1 billion, they say, see ya. And they just move their money somewhere else. And that's what happens.
Well, with the cap thing, what about there would be somebody who would be like, oh, great. Everything after it, let's give it you with the 99 million. I think I saw that meme. That somebody would be like, oh, great. Okay, I'll win capitalism. And then I will irrigate everyone with a little bit of wealth.
And here's the thing: most of these people, there's so many of these people who are giving away large chunks of their wealth anyway. Bill Gates started the what's the pledge that he founded?
Yep, that you'll give away. Is it 99%?
Yeah, of your wealth.
So Bill Gates has gotten most of the top, I'm going to say at least 50 richest people in the world to sign this pledge, and I can't remember the exact percent. It might be 1%, it might be 10%, but they're going to give away all their other wealth as part of this pledge.
Plus, the thing is, like, most of these people don't have a castle at the end of the block anymore that you can go up with torches and pitchforks and burn them down. Like, they're proof against this. They're bigger than most countries. So even if we're like, yeah, let's ban all billionaires, and we all raise our hand, like, they're not going away. We can't do that. But so the question is, what is practical? What is pragmatic? And what is pragmatic is lifting ourselves up and lifting our friends up, not railing against this impossible mountain. Like, I'm going to beat Mount Everest with my fist until it crumbles because it's too high. Like, that's not nearly as good as building up your own little mountain for yourself.
Well, so are you saying it's better if you're really frustrated with how things are going to actually take some agency than to just complain on Facebook?
I don't know. I don't know.
I am.
It sounds crazy.
I think you can do a little bit of both, because it's like, from the position that I'm in right now, I think that it behooves me ethically, certainly pragmatically, practically, and flat out artistically too, fucking psycho-spiritually. It is the move for me to try to figure out and become as functional as I can with finance. But also, I do see, like, not to go down too much on the political tangent, but like, we are gonna have to lift the floor. I don't know whatever we're gonna do with the ceiling, but if we don't lift the floor, there will be a mob with pitchforks and torches. Wait, that's already happening? That's only going to intensify. And I just see a lot of us being left behind. And once you get to a point of desperation, yeah, okay, that's cutting off that tangent.
No. I think this is a very important thing, and it is something I definitely wanted to touch on today, which is, right now, our government has just put $3 trillion. This is more money than the last 10, 15 years combined into our economy. And it's doing it in a way that we don't need to get into the details of, but it's been lifting up stocks, but it's not really been helping the average person. Those $600 checks that you got if you're on unemployment, that is a drop in the bucket. It's over. It's not going to last. Even if you get a little more, it's not going to matter, because one thing that right now, there's tons and tons of economists and financial experts who are all arguing with each other about what's going to go wrong. But they're almost all agreeing that this is a bad thing and it is going to go wrong. And this is part of why it's so important to understand basic finance now, because, and I'm going to ask this of each of you, I really believe in sometime within the next 3 months to year and a half, we are going to have another major financial event that is going to be a negative event, and that this is actually quite the opportunity if you are ready for it. Because if you started investing in the stock market back at the bottom of 2009, 2008, and you kind of rode this wave for the past 11 years, and again, you're just putting in $50 or $100 a month or every 3 months, you would have grown that somewhere near 250 to 300% from the beginning. And we're going to have another opportunity to start near the bottom. And here's the funny thing. When you start to look at investment, when you start to look at Bitcoin, when things drop, they're on sale. When investments drop, they are cheap. And if you buy investments when they're cheap and they go back up, you do very well. And I'm curious about your thoughts for each of you on what you see coming up here in the next few months. None of us can predict this. We're not prophets. Economists can't predict this. But how are you looking at, if there's something bad happens, how you're positioning yourself to take advantage of that, and how our audience can, even if they only have a little bit of money?
Me personally, my primary investment vehicle is real estate. So that's the reason that I chose that is because it's tangible and easy for me to understand. I also play around with Bitcoin and all kinds of other things too, but primarily how I put food on my table is with real estate. So I lived through the 2008 crisis, right? So I had recently dropped out of college, and I was at that point, I was flipping homes. I did like 350 times in 2 years. That's crazy. Pulling my hair out, making millions of dollars, and then I watched all that equity just disappear in 2008. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Changed my investment thesis and figured out, I wanted to move into something that was a little bit more recession or depression resistant. And I got into more longer term investments, rentals, things like that are less volatile, right? But I made almost all of my best buys in 2008, 2009, in the middle of the shit. Like, emptying out the last pennies I had of the small fortune I had made and lost most of over through that before the crisis, right? And I made some buys that now when I think about what I paid for some of these properties, I mean, it's hilarious. I mean, I remember walking around downtown Detroit and looking at 12, 14-story buildings for like $500,000 and being like, nah, I'm good on this one. I'll get a different one. Those same buildings now trade for like, $20 million. So just think about that, right? So I've learned that through that cycle. So into this next cycle, we've actually been raising money and putting a fund together. So we have our own private equity fund with some folks that also see that coming. And it's just, preparing and committing capital to saying, okay, when this happens again, that's when we're going to make acquisitions. So, because like you said, when things go bad, investments are on sale. The people that weren't prepared, the people that made bad decisions, the people that were over leveraged, the people that simply had bad ideas or get scared and freak out, when there's blood in the streets, that's when you get out there, right? So we're just literally having conversations casually now and saying, hey, let's build a fund, let's get a bunch of capital together, let's get all our docs prepared, and when this inevitable terrible thing happens, let's go out and make some opportunistic buys. And I'm a tiny fish in this world, There's big, huge organizations doing the same thing. So that's, and you look at these alternative assets, different from real estate, which is where I, have fun, but things like crypto, things like gold, hard assets, these other things, a lot of those things perform very interestingly in down markets because people freak out and are looking for play. There's one thing that people don't understand about money is there is unlimited capital. So just think about, I think the easiest example is the Japanese bond market, right? So if you don't know anything about what bonds are, I mean, they're the most kind of like stable investment you could possibly get you.
So bonds are basically they're how governments and corporations get loans from average people and other companies. So they will put out a bond, other people will buy that bond, and so then they will take that money, the company or the government, and then they will use that like it's a loan in order to reinvest it in whatever they're producing or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, and typically those are considered the safest investments, because if you're investing in a government, of course it's not going to fail, because governments don't fail usually
Until they do.
Until they do. But
and we're in a place where that all of this might start happening. Bonds aren't really the best place to be right now.
Correct. But anytime I'm trying to think like, oh man, I'm having a hard time raising money to do a thing that I want to do, I always remind myself of the Japanese bond market, because it's how many trillions of, I think it's 13 trillion, some gigantic, unfathomable amount of money that's invested at a 0 or negative interest rate. Okay, so this is just money that people or corporations or some kind of entity has that they would love to do something with, but they can't find anything to do with it that they deem safe enough to park it there. So they simply put it in a vehicle that is definitely going to depreciate while inflation happens. So then I'm like, oh, wow, okay, there's that parked over there. And then you start looking for other examples, and you can accumulate just incredible amounts of capital all around the world invested at no return.
So what's a kind of practical way that our audience can make use of that knowledge?
Listen to more J-pop.
If there we go. If not now, then maybe down a little later in their investing career.
Well, practically the way that I use that knowledge is to not ever succumb to this mindset of scarcity, because the mindset of scarcity, I think, is at the root of a lot of this conversation. When you start thinking of the world from a place of abundance, then all sorts of doors start opening. When you start thinking, if Zach does well, then fuck Zach, I should have that Corvette. You know what I mean? Because he has a Corvette, I don't have a fucking Corvette.
I got a motherfucking Mustang recently.
Did you really?
For $2,000 off a friend.
That's still
I
amazing.
spent several months sitting in the driver's seat side of my best friend's ride. I wasn't trying to holler at anyone, but I felt scrubbish, and then he popped the question, would you like to buy this for $2,000? And now I have a vehicle for the first time in several years.
Is it a V6 or V8?
I don't know what that means.
Does it make a really rumbly sound, or is it like a medium sound?
Yes, it has a lot of vegetable juice.
Okay, but anyway, so mindset of scarcity versus abundance, right? So like, you can break your head out of that, like, oh shit, in a downtime, everything's scarce, and just objectively look around, like almost like you can try to program yourself where you could literally just, sometimes I feel like I walk out in the middle of the street in a bad situation like that, and I look around and everybody's panicking, and I'm like, okay, and these little these little things start to open up, and I'm like, well, this person over here really wants to flee the country. Literally, I've had this happen. Wants to flee the country.
Get the fuck out of here.
Well, everything's on sale. Buy my business. I don't care. Give me $100. You know what I mean? So
we got different value systems. Not saying you and I, but like there's different value systems out there where, like me with the Mustang, for example. I have a very new appreciation of how that is good. It could be a Mazda, and I would be like, does it get me from the places to the things where fun is happening and art and things? And I feel like money can be very similar. Like I wanted to ask you, because I've seen the archetype of the neurotic millionaire billionaire. Like I've met folks like that, where it's like you're supposed to be the one who's winning, and you seem nervous, and like there's just stuff occupying your consciousness all day that is not doing happy stuff. And I hover between $5,000 recent because of unemployment, and a few thousand in debt my whole life career, and you seem more burdened with neurosis than me, or at least about money. Why should I win this if you're a winner? That's a question that a lot of people see, and so I would ask y'all, like how much is this occupying your thought time? And are there cars you used to park in that garage that now there isn't room for? Because somebody might, let's say there's somebody listening, right? Or I'll be the skeptic of like, well, you're sure got a lot to say about something that doesn't bring me any joy, And so sometimes what I think when I hear things that sound like Aramaic about the jargon words that you said, I can't even recall. I'll think, okay, the thing for me to do is to create value in the world and do that. And I think I know how to do that. But then as soon as I have a substantial amount of money, if I want to get into finance world, I should pay somebody who gets it to act on my behalf.
That's not crazy at all.
That's valid.
That's called a fiduciary. And you definitely, and here's the thing. Yeah, you want to go with the fiduciary, because it's better if you go with your average financial advisor. They are not legally bound to be in your best interest. And a lot of them are swindlers. And what they will do, and this is even big name investment companies, they will sell you things that get them a commission that maybe charge you a lot of hidden fees, and you don't do nearly as well over 20 or 30 years as if you work with a fiduciary. The term fiduciary means you're going to pay somebody else to give you advice about finances, and they are legally obligated to not sell you things that give them a commission, so that they are looking out for your best interest. And a lot of them will direct you to things such as index funds and what are called EFTs, Vanguard, what I mentioned before. And it's a very simple process, and it doesn't need to cost a lot of money. And it is completely legit to pay someone else to worry about that stuff.
I'm gonna tell you what I would do right now if I had $1 million is I would put one or all of y'all in a position where you had skin in the game.
That's the smart thing to do. Yeah. I mean, it happens to me weekly. Actually, what I've done is I just identify people in my circle that clearly have figured it out. And I say, hey, I just made a big deal and I have all this money now. What am I supposed to do with it? And they're, people in that position are typically happy to share with you this type of data if asked in a respectful way, so you can get free financial advice from successful people all day long just by asking,
Yeah.
And that's really, really powerful. Not saying you should always do exactly what they do.
Yeah.
But I try my best when people that I know say, hey, my grandma died and I inherited $35,000, true story, last week, right? What should I do with that? And I sat down with them and I said, hey, let's have coffee. I'll go through the thing with you for a half hour. And this is what I would do if I was in your position.
Yeah. That's the thing that I would like to make a business out of. And I get everybody's that I know who's a talky person with good stuff to say is figuring out a way to monetize their self as some sort of coachy person. And I think one of the things that I have an endless wellspring of, that there are those who are literally billionaires who are absolutely depleted, impoverished in this realm, is I always know what to do with time on earth and consciousness. And when I think of myself getting money, it's like, I know exactly what to fucking do with that. Or at least, there's a mission, there's a passionate mission, and there's compounding passion by how much we can actually affect in this world. And I think I could help others with that, because I have met some folks who are like the lonely pacing millionaire archetype, who are like I got all this money, but I don't know what I don't give a fuck about much.
That's very common.
Yeah. So with somebody who's got all the passion, it's almost like volts and amps, right? Like it would be really, really great for somebody who is wealthy in passion, but has always been like, fuck money, to get switched on to this right now and get into it and get powerful in that realm. Like I want the kind and passionate to become powerful right now.
So I think that what you're talking about here is that everybody's human. Like millionaires, people who are rich, they're human and they've got the same problems anybody else has. I know a lot of neurotic poor people. I know a lot of neurotic rich people. I know a lot of neurotic people in between. And the thing is, like, it's usually a life out of balance, right? So if you've got tons of money, but you don't got friends, you don't have creativity, and you don't have love and like ways to blow off steam in a really legitimate way and a sense of meaning, you're going to be miserable. And if you're poor, but you have all this possibility, but you can't act on it because you have no energy and you have no health care, and you end up getting sick or injured, that does you no good either. And I think the big part of Paradialectic is finding that dynamic range. How can you have money, energy, youth, creativity, connection, friends, by balancing these extremes and not seeing any of them as bad or wrong, except in the extremes, except in the exclusion, and having that flexibility to navigate. Or again, if you're not good at creating, but you're good at money, how do you help fund the things that you can't create? And if you are good at creating, like, how do you find those good people who aren't going to take advantage of you, that you can partner with, that can be patrons to that art that you're doing yourself? And how do we work to better together as a community, so that not everybody has to be experts at everything? And I think that's a big part of what community is in a lot of ways.
There's different Ninja Turtles who do different things. And that has been my thought on it. However, I haven't been doing this because of money consciousness blockages, or whatever you want to call it. My relationship with money has not been as such, or I feel like I'm at right now, where I can ask for help as long as I can articulate what specifically, or just generally what I'm about to do in the world. Like I don't feel the weirdness that I used to about putting the hat out, or about posting my Patreon in this thing right here. And I wanted to ask about that. Like, what do you guys think about that, about crowdsourcing, about something like Patreon? I know that it's come under controversy because there's been some things where they were unfair to their more conservative leaning people, but like the general idea of crowdsourcing, of like, some of us just don't get it, but we do stuff. And some of us,
my OnlyFans is fucking huge.
I don't know specifically about the controversy, but I think we live in an amazing time right now, because if you're doing something cool and you can show people you have this unlimited platform, all you have to do is get somebody's attention. And if you're creating something that they enjoy, they'll come, more people will come, and now we have all these awesome funding mechanisms. So even though we're still exploring these things because they're relatively new in terms of, 10 years ago, people weren't making tremendous amounts of money just running a YouTube channel like they are now. So we're living in an era where all kinds of new careers and jobs and opportunities are sprouting up every time we have new technology to enable it. And it's wonderful the kind of reach you can have to find the weird niches or the people that are into what you're into.
Even long form dialogue and podcasting, what we're doing now, how that's been around a minimal amount of time. And even being able to support that through something like Patreon, where you can donate directly towards what you're interested in, right? All that combination is what even allows something like this to exist, especially on a larger scale.
I think crowdsourcing is pretty freaking magnificent. And even, I don't remember exactly what year it was, but roughly a decade ago, the SEC guidelines changed, and crowdsourcing used to be effectively illegal to raise money. So back to something that was said earlier, financial terminology, jargon, all of these things, the world of finance for a very long time was a very closed, very nepotistic world. And it's steadily become more and more open, and the internet's got bringing more and more data to everybody's fingertips, right? So crowdsourcing was effectively impossible for, say, a business or a real estate project until roughly a decade ago. And then some regulations changed, and now there's entire platforms. Somebody like Zach with you with $5,000 could go dream up and
Not anymore.
whatever, you could.
But apparently you're saying there's more of it out there. And
there's a ton. So there's unlimited money, right? So you could, if you dreamed up, you live here, in Detroit, and you know people and you see things. If you dreamed up this idea and you paint a picture of it and you do your homework and read some books and create talk to some friends and create some kind of pro forma or some kind of program that seems to make sense, you can literally just push a button and put that project on the internet.
Yep.
And if people think it's a good idea, you can just legally accept their money. And that's really both really dangerous and really awesome at the same time.
Yeah, the thing that a lot of us have a hold up about ethically, and I think that it's psychological, it's psychospiritual. It's like it might have a personal or familial generational trauma thread story to it, or it might just be like what we've taken in about money and just how we conceptualize it. But for a lot of us artist folk, it's like the point of sale where I have now made something inaccessible to you unless you have the money. Like that's the part that we have a problem with, because it's like some of us are specifically trying to speak to those who are most downtrodden, or not like specifically, but it's like the idea of putting up a barrier of entry to the thing that to us is about connection and soothing. The idea that only those with money are able to access it, that's what fucked me up for a while.
So I think there's a big thing here. And I think many creative people solve this by having just two tiers of things. And one is that you have the free stuff that you put out in your podcast, you put on your YouTube, and this is accessible to everybody. And then for those who really want to support you, a lot of times when you buy something more, you're not buying it just because you're getting something from it. You're buying it because you support the person, which is funny because one of the people I bought their newsletter lately from, and I'm going to say his name because actually it's a great place if you're looking for an interesting perspective on finance. This guy Pomp has a podcast. His last name is Pompliano. He goes by Pomp. He has brilliant guests. It's cutting edge of tech and finance. And this guy already has millions and millions of dollars. His newsletter costs $50 or $50 per year. He doesn't really put much more information in his newsletters than he does in his free stuff. I'm happy to pay that $50 to a millionaire because his shit's so, and he's not making his stuff inaccessible. I have gotten so much information from his free YouTube videos that I would never need to pay any more for it, but it's worth it because that free stuff's so good. I'm happy to pay a little more for not getting much more from his private stuff.
I've told people before, because one of the things that I was, what's this fucking word, self-conscious about whenever I put out the hat and give an opportunity for somebody to crowdsource me as an artist. I've heard other things of what I do turned into an identifier word, but let's say artist. Let's say I do art. That I'll be like, oh, and I use it to make art, and I use it to and we do nonsense night, and that really helps the community in this way. And they'll just be like, Zach, if you wanna like buy sandwiches, like whatever, like I just want you to be in better standing to be able to exist thoroughly. And that's something that a lot of people have a hold up of this, is like, do I deserve this? Do I deserve this if there isn't this certainty that it will be a tool for me to do good ethical stuff in the world? And yeah, that knowing of deserving I think is a lot of people's hold up here.
But when we see that that money is energy, that taking that money creates more energy for you to share it with more people, to create more of it. So from a deserved perspective, you're just looking like, thank you for this energy. Now I will use this to expand my platform or create more stuff. Or so it's not,
or put it in my face,
or eat a sandwich. But whatever it is if you change, like Jeff was saying, if you transform how you see it, if you use a new word like capital, or if you think of it just as energy, it makes it a little bit easier, I think, emotionally to take it from somebody in exchange for what you're creating for them.
Yeah. Or also with the point of sale thing is like, if you feel like, oh, I'm giving a thing of great value. Oh, I just got the Manscaped lawnmower thing. So it's a Manscaper trimmer device that boasts that you cannot nick your scrotum. And they just won capitalism. Yeah, because they swoop down on the word thing. Manscape. Like that's a cultural concept that is like really exploded over the last little while, and to come in and be like, that's when you really win capitalism, like Band-Aid, Kleenex, when your company is the name of a thing. Oh, you did it.
That's when you get the plaque. Yeah.
I nicked not my scrotum, but somewhere, but also I may have been using it wrong. I was angling it. They in the instructions, they say, don't do this. I might've done that. But it's great. It works.
So I asked Doodlewolf what you kind of see in terms of if there's an economic problem, collapse. Some people are talking about inflation. Some people are talking about hyperinflation. That is where money quickly loses its value and prices go up really high. Or deflation, which sounds really good, which is where you actually have things costing less and less. But the problem is, because people are paying less and less for what they're buying, companies start to go bankrupt in big ways, which, if you don't like capitalism, sounds really good until you can't buy things that you need, which would become a problem. So regardless of what happens, this is for Corey and for Sam, what do you see as possible opportunities for our viewers if things do go belly up in the next little while?
So I think the easiest thing for me, I have a couple ideas, but obviously it's investing in Bitcoin or crypto assets generally. And the reason is because they hold an inverse relationship with any other financial market or financial instrument, which means that if other things are going down, more than likely it's going to go up, or at the very least it's going to retain its value, which can be exchanged globally. So having some amount of capital in Bitcoin, as the easiest form, will definitely be something that I can really recommend to anyone, because you don't need any specific amount of money to start, regardless of the price of it, because it's fractionary. Some other things personally is holding liquid capital that you can both use to
liquid capital, like
he means money.
Yeah, he means cash.
I mean, like blotter, right?
Cash in the bank.
Can I get a vial of liquid capital?
You can, but to use that to both buy stocks. So to buy any stocks or companies that you know things about, specifically in some category that you're informed about. So if you know things about technology, say you know a lot about semiconductors, then if you're following stocks, then you can look for them to fall. And once they fall, you can buy them at a discount. And then you can do the same things with options trading, although it's a little more complex.
What is options trading? So maybe we should say that one.
Maybe we should do a whole podcast on just investing.
Yep. I'm gonna say this quick bit
right now. You should do it right now.
So now that we're changing the whole format now. No, but if you're doing any options trading, then buying puts on companies that you expect to fall a lot is another great strategy that you can use. And all three of those are ones that I plan to use as we.
So he's talking about fancy active trading stuff that's a little advanced, but there are definitely things that, again, when there's volatility in the market, you can take advantage of that volatility if you understand what that means.
The barrier of entry to me still seems to be having some already.
Yeah.
And so I think that the first step for a lot of those in our community,
you can do that now for $20 on Robinhood. You can play the game for very, very little.
Maybe that's my note that I should take home immediately.
In fact, you have a bunch of millennials doing right now in a slower way, but it's going to be just as devastating as a lot of people did with cryptocurrency back in 2017. But it's good. It's good pain. As long as you don't put too much in, which is that when all of this money was going up, it felt like everybody was super, super smart. And it says, and then there's a phrase that's everybody's a genius in a bull market. And a bull market means that
what's a bull market? The
bull market. Thank you there, Sam. It means that the market is going up on a 45-degree angle somewhat. And there's these dips. You're like, well, they went down. I'm going to trade it. And then it goes back up. You're like, I'm a genius. Yeah. But the whole market is going up. And then what happened was when Bitcoin got near $20,000 and all the other cryptocurrencies blew up even bigger than that for their size, everybody thought they were smart, and then it went down and bounced and went down and bounced and went down and bounced, and people lost lots and lots of money. So one of the important things is if you're doing active trading and you're not diversifying and you're not doing things like dollar cost averaging, which means you're putting a consistent amount of money in a wide range of assets over time. It means the consistent amount of money over time. So you want to do both. You want to put a regular amount in and you want to diversify. That's the foundation of investing. But then if you want to play with it a little bit, be careful, because when the whole market's going up like this one has been for the last 11 years, you can seem really smart, but eventually what happens is things get oversold. Things are oversold now, and eventually those really high valuations are going to drop. And the thing is, irrational behavior can go on for a long time. So I don't know when it's going to drop, but the stock market will drop, and you've got to be careful. This is why you want other assets like gold, real estate, and things like that, which you can do without having to buy a whole house. We'll talk about the investment podcast.
So, the question was what can our listeners do right now? And when I was a kid, I read the Berenstain Bears books.
The Bernstein.
Whatever we're in the metaverse now, right? It's changed. I don't know. Anyway,
Berenstein.
Okay. So the way that they taught their bear children,
By the way, a bear market is the opposite of a bull market. So when you hear bear market,
that means everything's going down. The way they taught their kids asset allocation, which is a super important phrase that I'm going to come back to in a second, is
putting your money into different places.
Right, putting your money into different places, not just diversification, but so the way they did this in the book was the bears were given $1 for allowance, but they weren't given a dollar bill. They were given 4 quarters, and the quarters each went into a different little cup. So one was like long-term savings, one was short-term savings, one was spending, and one was charity. So every week they get these 4 quarters and they put it in the cups. And then over time, now each one of these has grown, and they spend the spending money, and they save the long-term savings for something important to them, and they give away the charity. And that's how they teach that you put your money, you break your money up into different uses. And we all kind of understand that with budgeting. I've never been able to time markets. So even though I personally do believe what Brick was saying, 100% that we are getting ready for probably in some period of time, could be 3 months, could be 12 months, could be 18 months. You have to understand right now, the United States is in the longest period of economic expansion in its entire history. Even after World War II, when our competitor nations were decimated and we made a ton of money and our country rose in prominence. Right now we've had 11 years since the last crash, and we are so overdue. And the reason we're so overdue for a cycle for things to go down again is because we keep pumping more and more and more money in, and all that's doing is it's delaying it. It's making the peak higher, and it's going to make the crash lower when it finally happens. But I can't tell you for sure when this is going to happen. What I can tell you to do is the same thing you can do no matter what, which is set up with whatever money you have, set up a plan where some of it goes into your savings, some of it buys Vanguard index funds or some diversified exposure to equities. Maybe some small amount goes into
what's an index fund?
So an index fund, thank you for asking that. An index fund is instead of buying individual companies, stocks in individual companies, you're actually buying all of them. If you buy an index fund, tracks a bunch of them. And the simplest ones are the total VTI, which is all stocks, or one that's the S&P 500, which is the 500 biggest companies in the United States. But you buy this index fund, it has super low fees. You just put regular money in, you make it automatic, so you don't even think about it, which is also really important. And the reason that's really important is because when things start going down, when they're getting cheaper and you're actually getting more and more, psychologically, you want to stop buying it. You're like, I'm buying this thing and it's crashing. I don't want to keep buying it. And that's exactly the moment when you need to be buying it, because you're getting more and more and more. And so if you make that process automatic, you take yourself as a decision maker out. It's just because it's not even a habit. It's just this thing that happens every month. I buy a little of this Vanguard. I buy a little bit of cryptocurrency. I put a little bit of money in my savings account. And then if the market crashes, great, because I'm getting more. And the longer it stays down, the more I'm getting. And as it goes back up, all of that stuff that I was buying is now worth more and more and more. And that's how you win without doing any thinking or making any other decisions.
I'm banking on that. I'm convinced that I'm going to learn how to play this game and start playing. And I'm waiting for this economic depression thing. Can I say something about an economic depression?
Yes.
To represent the not financially literate community. A lot of us had the experience of in 2008 seeing for a lot of us it was our dad ripping his hair out, crying, bleeding all over the keyboard, screaming at the heavens, why God, why has this happened? And we're like, what's going on? The world seems all right. Because there's this metric that we have not put our skin in the game of, that has fluctuated violently recently. And I think there's a lot of people. I've had my finger on the pulse of a lot of folks who not all of which are on Team Burn It Down. Some of which who are on just like we need something like a UBI, are counting on.
What's
this
a UBI,
economic,
Zach?
Yeah,
that is a
what is
universal
UBI?
basic income. That is a thing that Thomas Paine, who is seen as one of the thought seed sowers that made the West, as it were.
Old school finance guy.
Yeah, he was into this idea, but it has been recently popularized, most popularly by one Andrew Yang. And his number was $1,000 for everyone over 18. Though I think it should be like 21, 25, because when I was 18, and they started giving me $1,000 every year, right up the face. Anyway,
By the way, the UBI is something that universally can be accepted. You know, it's a Milton Friedman idea. That's a Martin Luther King Jr. idea. This is something that crosses all kinds of political and social spectrums in a really, really powerful way.
Yeah, it's and in a really pragmatic way. It's don't end up with your face in a guillotine. And that's like not a threat for me. That's the reality of what I'm observing, is that it's like it's going to be like a lot of folks are going to flee, or they're going to be, because that is not the call. I am not the leader of the organization of the what's the word people say, disenfranchised. Those of us who are outside of this game and just kind of have been existing as the losers of it at a certain level of desperation, that crowd is going to be like, well, where is the food? Anyway, I think a lot of us, a lot of people that I know are banking on this, of like, oh, this economic depression is going to come and it's going to really suck. Mostly it's going to really suck as far as losing a lot of money for people who are already significantly wealthy and invested. For the rest of us, it's just going to be like, well, something's fucked here, and then rapid inflation happens, and then you can't buy food. Like, what's the trajectory to
even the losers, as you say, the losers of this game? If you look at long time, which is a hard thing for anyone to do because scale and time are the hardest things to perceive, right? If you look at long time, right, like 200 years, the losers of today's capitalism, are they really losers?
Compared to people 500 or 1,000 years ago.
Oh, you're saying relatively, as in like a lower class
the
family.
The person at the absolute bottom of the rung today. Think about them today versus even 200 years ago. Are they actually a loser in long time?
They got Pornhub.
So Pornhub, access to information, right?
Upward mobility, of which some people would say that's very theoretical.
Food,
but
fast food, the ability to order things off of Amazon, like the actual lifestyle of people today who are in making $25,000 or less a year, $25,000 to $16,000 less a year, compared to what was available to the middle class or rich 500 to 1,000 years ago. That quality of living, the food, the healthcare, the entertainment, the access to knowledge is on such a different level that, again, it's a matter of, like, we talk about lots of advantages that people have, but I think a lot of people take for granted that there is a privilege to living in the 21st century in almost any developed country compared to what our ancestors had to go through for the last 30,000 years and any level of wealth.
And don't get me wrong, I'm profoundly disappointed. I fully expected flying cars and hoverboards.
Totally. Yeah. Jetpacks.
I think the fear that people have when you say that, because it's objectively true. You're living a better life than even if you were rich as fuck 100 years ago from all kinds of perspectives. But the fear people have that when you say that is that that means that we take the eye off the prize. We know we can do better. We know we can do better. in the United States, everybody can have health care. So we can do better. So even if the people that are on the bottom right now are doing better just because of technology and all these other advances, we can say that, and it doesn't need to be threatening to the other idea, which is that we can still do better.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. And so that, I think that's a powerful thing again. And for me, I always like to redirect the conversation back to pragmatics. Like, if you're doing well in your community, you can help take care of your family. If you are doing well in your community, you can take care of yourself so you're healthy, so you can create projects and events that lift other people up. A big reason why I started, I helped manage the Detroit Fire Guild, is I realized most of my friends worked in the service industry, and most of my friends weren't going to go to college. I did, and I knew a little bit about business. So the reason why we ran the Detroit Fire Guild the way it was is to help my friends learn hands-on, without going to college, how to promote themselves as entertainers, how to make money as entertainers. And that was something I could do because of the privilege that I had to go to college and to have the businesses that I had. And I think that we can all share that, and that's pragmatic.
Yeah. And you don't have to one or the other accept the game exactly as it is and just play right now as it is. Like, we can be working on toggling on troubleshooting, calibrating the game to make more sense or be more fair. Though there's definitely a debate to be had about fair, about equity. But well, the way I see it right now, it's like there's no way for me to avoid, if I'm going to be living in this country for the next. It behooves me to figure out how to do this. And to help others like have that as a felt value, just because of the pragmatic aspect. I mean, there's so many.
You know who's an awesome example?
Who's that?
So you like the art park, right?
I love the art park.
Okay, so you know how the art park got started, right?
The Lincoln Street Art Park. How did the Lincoln Street Art Park get started?
So Matt Noren. I asked specifically for his permission to talk about that project before this, because I wouldn't.
Matt Naomi?
Yeah, I didn't want to disclose any of this prior to talking to him about it. But, those guys did some kind of silly, irresponsible, crazy shit acquiring that piece of property during a very downtrodden time, right? So something like what we might experience here in the near future. So they've created a space that is such a nurturing and amazing and creative space for our community.
God, yes.
I mean, just think of all the things that you've participated in there that are adjacent to all of your friends and all of the things that we've done over the years, right?
Saturday was great.
So that wasn't free, I mean, the way they got the building was pretty creative, but
I see where you're going with this. Yeah.
I don't think that Matt or Oren were particularly independently wealthy when that thing started, and neither did they have a really deep understanding of my job, which is real estate development, right? Which I've done for the past 15 years. And, a couple of years ago, I got a call from Matt, and he's like, "Hey, I'm doing this crazy shit. I think I need a real estate developer or some people that know some shit about finance or some shit. Will you come talk to me real quick?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, man. I'm in Detroit. I'll pop over and we can chat." Right. And I walk in there, and they have some pretty cool ideas of, at its core, it seems that their main priority was to preserve the space that they hold for our community. Right. But the game was encroaching upon them. Detroit is not the same now as it was 10, 12 years ago, right? You actually have to stop at stoplights and maybe pay property taxes or, maintain buildings, maybe these types of things, right? And the pressure of that reality, like you're saying, you wake up to now is encroaching on them. And I just talked to Matt the other day, and in that time, he's created what hopefully will become a project there to sustain this culture into the future for a long time, that is significantly more complicated than what I do for a living. Oh. He was explaining his capital stack to me, and he was saying things that were just like, I was following him, but it was extremely complicated, and I was highly impressed. And Matt is not a real estate developer, he's not. And he's using acronyms that I'm like, wait a second, I need to make sure I know what that is. But those guys, they put their nose to the grindstone and were like, hey, we got to save this thing. And the only way to save it is to grow it and to bring it into the modern age. And they have a really cool plan, and I'm really hoping it works. And it's it's an example, especially in the Burning Man community, where it's like, hey, you can kind of like will things into existence to a degree, but if you actually want to create something sustainable, you have to face some of these realities. The porta potties at Burning Man aren't free. Somebody has to.
They're disgusting.
They're disgusting, but somebody has to rent those and place those and clean those and pay for those. It's so I always struggle with that because the decommodification principle. We go do that for some period of time, depending on what the particular event is, whether it's a regional or Burning Man or a party that we throw or something. And decommodification is fun, but is it a vacation or is it a lifestyle? Is it something that I've often personally treated it as a vacation because so much of my life is focused around thinking about capital because that's what I do. So for me, it's just this huge weight off my shoulders, but I don't think that's necessarily the right way to think about it, but yeah, that's a really cool example of people in our community doing their best to understand how this fucked up system works.
And there's usually that is something that I see in all situations where a bunch of folks get to either forget about money for a while or really throw themselves into the new game of a gift economy of let's just make as much awesome and generate as much meaningful, passionate experience amongst us. There's usually somebody who's footing the bill, and I can't ignore that anymore. I may have to. No, I choose to become that so we can have more of those bubbles of what I call reality, the musical, the festival, to exist outside of the desert. Yeah, Burning Man ain't free, and not just in terms of money, but like there's a ton of people who have to put so much effort into having so that Black Rock City can exist, so Lakes of Fire can happen for 4 days.
And I think that I really want to come back to something here, because whether it comes to Burning Man and having billionaires there doing billionaire art projects, or I've also heard criticisms labeled against or kind of directed against Miami for kind of like selling out and doing this project, or what we just talked about a minute ago, like what if the people who are currently poor in our society are doing better than 500 years ago? When we talk about comparisons and we look at people who have more and people who have less, it is a distinctly emotional paradox and a distinctly emotional dialectic. Like, what does it mean to be poor now compared to poor 500 years ago? What does it mean to feel like I'm saying I live in a world of abundance, but this person's experiences of scarcity, that the big part that we're talking about here is not just physical reality, but the subjective judgment of what it means for other people to have wealth or advantage compared to what we have, or compared to what other people who we care about have. And I think this comes to like systematic inequities in our country when it comes to things like race and gender, women getting paid less than men at most jobs. Though it's not true in my profession, that there's actually more females, and a lot of times those women get paid more, but it is true in most professions. So I think part of what we're looking at here is the emotions around money, the emotions around people around us doing well, and what it means to actually take this attitude of being frustrated, pissed off, upset that other people have things that we or people who we care about don't. Or what does it mean to take this energy and to be grateful when we have less than those people around us, where our health is poor and we're worried about healthcare, and how do we within ourselves work with those paradoxes so that we can live in a way that's helpful to us and helpful to those around us? And so I think I'm asking that out loud. So how do we do that?
Well, first of all, we don't bring up the gender pay gap, which is based on a single level analysis. Everyone knows that you don't.
So you sound like a certain individual.
So back to like,
sorry,
I take that back to decommodification when we create those spaces and do those things. So the answer for me personally, while I do, selfishly treat that as a vacation to a degree, I also get to exist in that space, and I learn things in that space. And I learn how to be more human. I learn how to treat people less like a sociopath and more like somebody who's connecting with somebody on a base human level, not based on your status or what clothes you're wearing or what car you're driving or what job title you have, right? Don't get me wrong, there's still certain degree of that at Burning Man. I think we can all
Yes.
can all acknowledge. But
There's some social climbing there as
it's
possible.
It's different, so I think we can use that part of our culture to experiment and to use that space to think about things differently than we would daily. So I try to bring that out of, I take that out of those events and employ those things in my daily life, and that's been super valuable to me.
Yeah, it would be so much better than people being forced. I think we would all agree that if folks by their own volition who were, let's say, billionaires, were like, oh, there seems to be quite a bit of unnecessary suffering going on all around me because of people who don't understand the thing that I have mastered, that maybe I'll help out with that. And they some do. But we're in this place now of, the recalibrating of the game. Anyway, next person to answer that question.
Well, I think if you have that, if money is a negative emotion for you, then you will, because you relate to that negatively, then because of the subconscious effects, it'll never feel good to take action around it. It'll always be this extra barrier. So it's so important. One of the easiest ways to do this is if you donate money, if you give away money, if you see the impact that it can have on people, that can transform that emotion for you, because it can go from feeling like a greedy thing or a power hungry thing to an empowering thing because of the effect you can have on others. So if you're somebody who's stuck in that negative emotion, do something for somebody else with your money, see how it can actually impact them. And suddenly that emotion will transform, and you can see it just as a tool and not as this thing that you've always related to in a bad way.
Yeah, I definitely want to see it as a tool, because it's what it's been a lot is a hindrance.
The most satisfying thing I've ever done with money is to give it away. More satisfying. It gives you a better high than buying the fanciest thing that exists out there in the world.
I was able to do a thing for a person when I was up more than I ever was recently, and that felt pretty good. It felt pretty good. And then afterward, there was the thoughts of like, should I have done that? Because obviously there's a stingy voice within us all.
Are you creating a welfare state, Zach?
Yeah.
What does your stingy voice sound like in your head?
They need to figure out how to lift themselves up by their own goddamn.
I love how Jordan Peterson sounds like Kermit the Frog. This is fucking brilliant.
Other way around. Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about this program, this podcast, that is helping me. Also confusing the fuck out of me. It is so much simpler to be dualistic and to have your side, your tribe, and then fuck them other turtles. Like that's a much more simple way to go about doing reality and social. But I'm not on a side here, but I want to push back where I see a place to push back, and right now I feel very, very committed to becoming a financially literate financial existence, because I know that it will help me to enact the things that I think are most important in this world. But also there's a voice that's like, so a lot of us, a lot of my generation has this with their dad, where it's like, how much of their brain time and how much of their emotions is wrapped up in something that other people don't have it coiled so much in that. Like I do know some people who have been able to travel the world and have really, really magical, really, really improvised experiences over the course of months without any money. But I see that and I'm like, I like to shower, and yeah, so it's just like, weigh in your value system and then see, what your next move is. I definitely think that it is important to note that we are all involved in this game. But even though I've found myself really wanting to, to get in this world and fuck around and find out and see what I can do, and what I can be in my community and other communities and across the world, if I had more freedom and I still think that there's a reason why so many of us want to spend, 7, or for most of it's more like 10 days in the desert, where the thing that we have bought in to be able to experience is a world without money, even though that can be argued is completely an illusion. Is because
coffee.
Huh?
Really good
Ice and
illusion.
coffee.
Yeah, that is true.
But I think that's true also with a lot of the spaces that are also open to us here in Detroit, whether that's the Tangent or whether it's the Art Park. Like we can go there and feel like this is free and we're not spending money, but Joe is, Matt is, like the people putting in Burning Man are, all of the people bringing the artwork are. That is not decommodified, and we can pretend that when we're doing this artwork and we're doing these artistic things, that this isn't coming from somewhere, and that we aren't doing this in places that people don't have to be capitalist in, or not. Capitalist is the wrong word. They don't have to be thinking about how to manage this energy in such a way that it creates a home and a space for us to do this in. I think the more that we take responsibility for our own energy creation and use, the more that our entire community can do. So when I go to Toronto, for example, it's really brilliant to see them have 7, 8 art cars. And these are people who also give quite a bit to charity. Again, this is not mutually exclusive. The more you have, the more you can give. And that means to your friends. And it also means to the people who can be lifted up by what you have. And
the Toronto crew is super supportive of the other ones.
Yes, very much so.
They just keep growing. I'm missed it. I went to their shop last year and I just walked in there and I was like, oh, these people are building another art car. We're just helping them do it. And I'm like, we need more of that.
Right, exactly. And this is the thing, is that I think that we have a lot of that ability here. We have a lot of space here, and Detroit is cheaper, less expensive than so many other places in the country. I mean, I love Detroit, and it's one of the places I would be. One of the other places I would be is Seattle, but I can't afford Seattle. And
not with that attitude, you can't.
Excuse me, not with that attitude, you can't.
At this moment, I can't. So with the people here, with the things here, I can put less money into making money and more money into creating art by living in Detroit than if I went to Seattle. And I might be able to find that abundance out there because maybe the network has more money available that I could tap into because it's out there. But I guess that's part of what I'm saying is, even if we don't have a lot of more sources of income here in Detroit currently, that we also have more opportunities because things are less expensive. So there's ways to take advantage of where you're at and make it where it goes. And this is not saying that things couldn't be better for us and our friends, but it is saying that you always have to look at what is the abundance that you have access to? What is it you can be grateful for? And that doesn't mean that you can't also fight and set boundaries for your rights and what you deserve. You can do both, and that's the paradox in a lot of ways.
Yeah, scarcity abundance is the big factor I see.
So I also want to kind of touch on something really briefly here, because most people at the table, and Zach, you just surreptitiously bought your first fraction of a Bitcoin the other day. We're not going to get really deep into this, but I would like to say that for those who are getting started investing, the safe way to go is things like Vanguard, EFTs and index funds, very stodgy, very old school. But also one thing that I wish I'd done when I was younger is that I'd made some more risky investment bets and things that might have petered out, but in the long run, that small amount of money that I would have put in at that time, I wouldn't miss it at this point in my life. I wouldn't have missed it 10 or even 20 years ago. I might have met a little bit then, but had I put it in that risky thing that was moderately risky, I would have gotten outsized rewards. And I think that one of the few places these days that you can get outsized rewards, and you don't even have to get into the other cryptocurrencies, is Bitcoin. And I know that, like Sam, you got into Bitcoin early. I know that you made some money on Bitcoin. And as we mentioned with Corey, Bitcoin is what got reintroducing me to cryptocurrency, is what got me back thinking about investing in my finances. So to those who have been in it, what is unique about Bitcoin as a way that people can invest if they don't have much money that might help them make more? And secondly, might also help them understand the other financial markets.
What's unique about it that helps people understand?
So what makes Bitcoin different from other things, and why is Bitcoin not just something silly that's going to die tomorrow necessarily? Magical internet money.
So Bitcoin. So my interest in it came a long time ago because I heard about this thing called Silk Road. which if you're not familiar, Silk Road is where people could
You're a
Pantyhose.
drug addict.
This is where you get pantyhose.
That's
Yeah,
where
totally.
you buy drugs.
weapons and all kinds of crazy shit. But there was this. But I read this article.
Drugs. Sorry.
I read this article on Gawker. This is like 9 years ago. About this eBay for illicit goods, and I didn't understand it because I was like, why don't they just shut down the money? And they kept talking about this thing called Bitcoin. Everyone was using Bitcoin. So I have a computer science degree. So I was like, oh, I'll read about this. And I read the white paper. A white paper is just like a technical description. And I realized in the white paper that Bitcoin solved a fundamental problem in computer science. It's called the Byzantine's general problem. And it's just, to make it really simple, it's just how do you trust people in a zero trust environment? So Bitcoin solved this problem through a really elegant solution called a blockchain. You might have heard that word, blockchain.
So basically, Bitcoin, the Byzantine's general problem, it kind of means like that you can't cheat somebody, you can't fake a Bitcoin transaction.
Right. We all can agree on how many Bitcoins every address has. Anyway,
You could, but you would need a tremendous amount of computing power.
right. You'd have to redo all of the work that's been done previously by everybody.
You
So
need the amount of computing power of a small country.
So anyway, the cool thing about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in general is it's an asset class. An asset class, like when we talk about equities or we talk about precious metals, or we talk about real estate, or we talk about bonds, or we talk about all these things. These are groups of things that have value. Okay, and cryptocurrency was a new thing. It was a new thing that had value because it solved these problems and it let us do something you could never do before. And just to give you a really simple example of that, you can store cryptocurrency in your head. You can remember your keys. So instead of having treasure maps and having to like bury gold.
So what's a key? Is it kind of like a password?
Yeah, it's like a password that lets you spend that money, and only the person that has that key can spend that money. So you could remember that. I'm not advising this, but you could remember it, and you could walk across the border, or you could go to prison for 10 years, or you could do anything, and no one else could ever have access to that. They couldn't find it because it's only in your head. And so this is not really smart because you could forget it, obviously, but this still it allowed something new that we'd never had before in the world. And a lot of people like me think that Bitcoin is the better form of gold, that certain things make good monies. They're divisible, they're fungible, I have to explain all those. But certain things make things good. Certain things are selected as money.
And it's a scarce asset. So there's only 21 million Bitcoin, and that's similar to the gold, and that gold is hard to mine.
Right.
And that's part of what makes gold valuable.
But the thing about gold is, as gold becomes more valuable, more mining companies start. So the rate that gold comes into existence actually fluctuates, but the rate that cryptocurrencies come into existence is set by the protocol at the base level. So we know how many Bitcoins there will be, and we know when they will be created, and this is all figured out. So
how do dollars come into existence?
How do dollars come into existence? Oh man, I'm not doing that one right now.
So basically,
money printer go brr.
And then this is a hugely important point, and I'm glad that Jeff brought this up. Is we just put $3.5 trillion.
If you take all the different global stimulus, it's $6 trillion
from this country, and then over the entire globe, $6 trillion just went into the market out of nowhere. That means that money overall, standard like dollar bills, become worth less because they're not scarce. This means that scarce assets like gold, silver, certain commodities, real estate, and Bitcoin, if the money drops in value, if inflation spikes, then things like Bitcoin and gold will be worth much, much more, which is why that they're useful to have going into a financial crisis. Am I correct?
Maybe.
Yeah,
kind of.
Theoretically, if we have inflation, then we have assets that go up in value when there's inflation. We'll do really well. But the last thing I'll say about cryptocurrency that's so cool is a lot of investments. Like if you wanted to get into Facebook real early, or you wanted to get into a lot of early Uber real early, you have to be an accredited investor. And there's a couple different ways to become it, but the easiest way is just to have a lot of money, to either be a millionaire or to make a couple $100,000 for a couple of years. And if you don't meet that qualification, you're not an accredited investor, and you can't buy this shit, and you can't buy it early when it would actually go up high in value, like you were saying. The difference with cryptocurrency is everybody can buy it with any amount of money. You can go on Coinbase.com with $10 and buy your first cryptocurrencies. You can actually watch some videos and they'll give you cryptocurrencies.
You can go on Robinhood, you can go on Cash App. Soon you can do it on PayPal, and Venmo are going to be making Bitcoin and Ethereum available soon.
So it's available to everybody. No matter how much money you have or don't have or anything else, you can participate in this in some level. My mom buys $20 of cryptocurrencies every month, and she's been doing that for a long time. And because over time, one of the coolest facts is that even if you bought in at the bubbles, if at any point, if you've been buying in dollar cost averaging into cryptocurrency at any single point you started in the last 10 years, you've made money right now, because over time these things have gone up. So even if you watched a commercial on TV, or you saw some news story and you got super hyped up at the top of the bubble, the absolute worst time to buy in, and you started right then, because then it went down and goes back up because you're buying a small amount every time. Yeah, you bought that first investment didn't do as well, but over time you're buying it when it gets cheaper and then back up, and you've made a lot of money. And so dollar cost averaging, buying a little bit on a set basis of all kinds of assets, is a good idea. And I think it's especially a good idea with hyper volatile assets like cryptocurrencies.
And something else, the reason why it's probably not going away beyond everything Sam has already said, is discussing that it's a new asset class. And that means some part of bonds, some part of stocks, some part of real estate. People that would normally put money in any of those assets to invest and to grow are then going to put it in Bitcoin. So Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are going to take some portion of all those markets. What portion we don't know, but we know they're going to take some portion. And that means the value that was previously in those assets are now going to be moved over to something that we know is scarce and there's a finite number of.
So I bought Bitcoin pre PayPal having prevalence and pre Cash App and pre Venmo having prevalence. So my initial interest in it, well, I did strongly distrust and hate the government. So that was kind of I was like, hey, okay, they can't do anything about this shit. I like that, So and I can, I have friends in other countries. I was like, oh, I can just press a button. I have to pay an international wire fee and waited 2 days to make sure my money got there and all this kind of stuff. So I saw it as a huge financial and social equity tool. So I, for instance, also have a construction company that may or may not have hired many migrant workers over the years. People who, we can talk about first generation immigrants for another hour if you guys ever want to, but a lot of these folks are the hardest working, just salt of the earth, best people I've ever met in my entire life, and they kill themselves every day to send $5 back to Honduras or El Salvador.
You're paying people $5 a day?
No. I mean, they'll
I'm kidding.
They'll earn their wage, pay whatever it is, whatever the cost of whatever it is to do their life, and to send $5 a day to somebody in a country that's extremely impoverished, not benefiting from these types of systems that we're talking about, Venezuela. $5 goes a hell of a long way, right? And these folks, I'd see them go to, Western Union or these extremely predatory, ridiculous ways to transfer money. So I actually taught a whole bunch of immigrants how to use Bitcoin. And I was like, hey, you want to send your money for basically free in extremely small amounts whenever you feel like it, almost instantly. And they're like, what? So there are some, there's some barriers there. But after figuring it out, that from a social and economic equity perspective, that was one of the most powerful things that I've ever seen.
Well, I think what you're bringing up is that it's bringing banking to third world countries that don't have any banking previously.
They don't trust their own banks.
Well, they can't. Right? Look at Venezuela that was dealing with hyperinflation. You saw a lot of the country, especially those who are impoverished, putting their assets into crypto because they could use that to still trade and they wouldn't lose all their value. They wouldn't have to, have money that was worth something last week, but is now, a tenth of the current value. So they couldn't even buy bread with it. So it's fine.
You're done, Corey.
Yeah.
So beyond that, I took that and I started using Bitcoin. My initial Bitcoin thesis had nothing to do with investment. It only had to do with utility, right? So I look at it from a utility perspective, and I bought something like $2,500 worth of Bitcoin at $96.
Yeah.
So think about that.
Doing okay.
You know what I mean? And I had a hard sell on it, 20 grand, by the way. That's why I remember that. I was like, oh, fuck. I was
So it
watching
didn't
just
get
go,
triggered?
oh, no.
You went all the way up and
all the way up to 1978 or whatever it was. That was a roller coaster. But regardless, so what Bitcoin taught me most, beyond all that stuff, is about money. Like the biggest question that I was like, I'm going to really understand this. This is really cool. So I read the white paper, and then I picked up the Book of Satoshi. I forgot who wrote that, but the Book of Satoshi. It basically is a Cliff's Notes with explanations of the white paper.
So Satoshi Nakamura is the anonymous person who nobody knows who it is, which is one of the most astounding mysteries in modern age, is the person who created Bitcoin.
Right. So I was like, well, I'm going to figure this out, So the white paper, for somebody who's not versed in computer science like myself, is extremely confusing and not easy to understand. So that book kind of breaks it down into layman's terms. And I was like, wait a second. And I walked away from reading that book, not understanding Bitcoin, but understanding fiat currency in general. Like, so that's why I asked, what is a dollar? How does a dollar get made? What the fuck is fiat currency? How does it even work? You know, that's a fundamental question behind all that stuff. And when you actually ask those questions and you actually figure out what the Federal Reserve is, and you actually figure out how the economies function, you actually figure out who makes these decisions, you realize that anytime I bring up Bitcoin and like in financial circles, like my friends that have, work at or have a lot of money that do a lot of other things kind of laugh at me and are like, oh, you're just, crazy guy talking about Bitcoin. But I'm like, oh, you're a crazy guy talking about dollars.
Right. And here's the thing, this is really changing this year. And this is something that's really powerful. And I think I really want to share this for the audience. There's a lot of people in the audience who have heard people say that Bitcoin is just magic internet money. It's going to fail. It's going to fail. It's not worth anything. But money's not worth anything. Like gold's not worth it. Yeah, you can make jewelry out of gold, but you can make jewelry out of lots of stuff. Like what creates value is our agreement that something has value.
Dollars are just a memory of what buys a Coca-Cola.
So we call dollars fiat cash because fiat cash is cash that's no longer pegged to a stable asset like gold. And in 1971, the United States went off of the gold standard, and at that point they could start to print as many dollars as they wanted, and this is what got us out of the 2008 crisis. And they never stopped printing money, and they just ramped it up this summer with COVID, and they were ramping it up even before COVID. So what happened was when our stock market crashed in March, that Bitcoin also crashed. But what happened when Bitcoin crashed this time is major financial players, major mainstream financial players went to places like Fidelity. Fidelity is a major financial institution that now custodies Bitcoin as of about a year and a half ago. And they went to things like Grayscale Investment Fund, which is something that you can buy if you go to any major financial institution. You can put it in your 401k, you can put it in your IRA. That the Grayscale Investment Trust gained $3.5 billion over a couple of months. They went from having $1.5 billion total under assets under management, and today that they have over $6 billion. They added $4.5 billion this year, and they've been in business now for I think 6 years. And this tells you that mainstream big players are buying into Bitcoin because they're scared of what's about to happen with all of this money being printed in the stock market still going up.
Yeah, because that's the thing that I wonder if I just don't understand this, or if nobody understands this. And it's with the debt to China, for example, is like all you get to I don't know how many trillion it is, but it's like nobody is theorizing that's going to be paid back at any point. So it's just kind of this mutually assured we're not allowed to have a real hot war sort of thing.
Well, there's a whole new theory of money that called modern monetary theory, and I started to really dive into this early this fall or this spring when the stock market crashed and then went right back up, and the economy didn't get better. And the stock market and the economy are not the same thing. And I wanted to go, why the fuck did that happen? Because that's not what I learned. So what they found out is in 2008 is when they bailed out the banks. They just put tons of money into the system and things got better. And then somebody goes, why don't we just keep doing that? And it's never stopped. And this is part of the reason why we've had the longest bull market in the world's history. This 11-year bull market is because they keep putting money in. And this is why COVID happened. Like 30% unemployment, 25% unemployment. If you look at the real numbers, they're still pumping money in. And it still keeps sending stocks up, even though the average person is not getting richer.
So there's only theoretical consequences?
Oh, I think there's going to be very real consequences. It's just going to take a little while.
But what is that? That's the part that I don't understand. What is the wall that you hit when you're just printing it?
So eventually fear will take over. And when fear takes over, right? So it's greed until it's fear, and then greed and fear. It's this pendulum that goes back and forth. And when everyone's buying and we're hitting record highs, we're in the greed phase. And when things start crashing and then they keep crashing, and now you're down and you don't have any cash because all your money was in the market, and now you want to sell, but it's depreciating. It keeps going down. Then the fear takes over until we hit this point called capitulation, which is at the bottom. And it happens in all these market cycles. It's what happened in 2008 with the real estate, which ended up bringing down everything. It'll happen again. These cycles will keep happening. It's just a matter of how long is it going to take until it does.
And if we do something like universal basic income to not even necessarily raise, but secure the floor to the point where you can't just entirely bottom out and get to the point of desperation where you're willing to do anything, i.e. Hashtag guillotines, then that would be a problem of mostly the rich.
We're going to probably need UBI, in my opinion. We're probably going to need UBI just because of automation. We're going to hit this period in the next 10 years because of AI, where so many jobs are
next 10 years. How about right now? I mean, if there's going to be any effort to have people not be face to face and gathering in groups, then it's like, we need that shit immediately. I think
there's the jobs that are lost because the economy slows down or because there's a virus. And then there's jobs that are lost because they don't exist anymore.
Yeah. I mean, those are both happening at once, and they compound each other. I think that it is now is the time.
I think
it
Yang's
seems so obvious to me.
Yang pretty much nailed it. I generally agree with his
I mean,
idea.
We basically did it, right?
Yeah.
We didn't do full UBI, but we did unemployment. We did a stimulus. We're giving people money.
Republicans did it. A Republican administration gave a bunch of people tons of money, and that goes against everything that they've always said was fiscally responsible.
If you look at our current budget and what happens, there's a great argument that it's actually more fiscally responsible than what we're currently doing.
Oh my God.
Streamlining entitlements in general. So it's called an entitlement. Like Yang's idea is literally like, you were born in the United States of America, you're entitled to a piece of what's been built here, right? Which is kind of crazy in a lot of ways, but I also kind of agree with it.
Not if you want people to have this felt sense that they are part of the community and that they are part of the game and the effort, then how do you not?
So the game pays a dividend to everybody that lives here, and that lifts the lowest people out of poverty. And by lifting the lowest people out of poverty, you create this crazy effect across the rest of the economy, where you don't have all these emergency services that are extremely expensive and all these other things that happen that actually end up costing the average taxpayer a shitload more money. So he actually did the math, and I read through his budget, and it theoretically made sense.
Oh my God, the crime rate would plummet.
The biggest pushback I've heard on UBI has actually been from I thought it would be from conservatives that were like welfare state, but it's actually been from liberals who are concerned that it'll make minimum wage less important and it'll devalue labor. And I look at it differently. I think you give people financial security, and now they're less likely to work, or they're less likely to take a shitty job because they're secure anyways. They're not taking out of desperation.
I don't think anybody's secure at $1,000.
No. But they're more secure.
They're just not.
It's not, if you give, it's not enough money desperate to stop working, but it's enough money where maybe one parent can stay home with the kids, or from both of them, or you have more control and more power from it. So it gives people
I did a
more
thought
control.
Experiment with some fellow burners, and we sat down and we said, hey, what if that happened? What if we were like, okay, so if 40 of us got together and we went out and bought some cheap dirt out in the middle of UP or something like this for this much money, did the math and ran out the debt and all this stuff, and we're like, we could run an entire society on this without needing to depend on anything else. So just depending on what you're again, what you're.
So we're starting a commune. Is that what I'm hearing?
I mean, it's possible, right? Like, so it opens up all these doors for like hybrid societies and stuff. It's pretty interesting.
It would make someone. I mean, I'm already pretty far along this path. Not to say that like all paths lead to this, but I know a lot of my friends who the thing that I see causing the most scarcity and difficulty in their life is their adversarial relationship to the state, to society, to whatever it is that's keeping the lights on, that's keeping the water flowing, although sometimes it is poisonous in some places. But it's that feeling like you're part of this, like you're part of this country, you're part of this world, more so this country. Like that would really help a lot of people who are in a really, I don't see that turning around without something where they are made safe. And then they see somebody, they see the Jeff Bezoses and the Elon Musks, and they have so much criticisms of them. And I think that is intensified mostly by the immense poverty that we see in the wealthiest country in the history of the thing. Is that true in the history of the world? I guess it depends
how you measure wealth, but I would say probably.
Well, at this point, we've gone a lot longer than we kind of expected to, which is
2 hours.
Excellent. So I would like to kind of wrap up. If you were going to leave the audience with 1 or 2 important ideas that you want them to take from what we talked about today, what would you say that is? Kind of starting with you, Sam.
I think one of the things I would leave people with is just that money is a skill that you get better at over time. There's not there doesn't need to be get rich quick. If you hear get rich quick, it's usually a scam, but you can definitely acquire wealth over time, almost certainly, as long as you follow these basic principles. And that it can be to you. It doesn't have to be greed and power seeking people. It can be security and freedom and the ability to help the people you care about. So you can, if you transform your relationship to it, you can just use it as a tool, and it can be a great force in your life and for those around you.
Same thing. See money as a tool, not as a evil, magical spirit that's out to get you and make you not be able to do something. Try to objectify it and try to learn tools that work for you. You know, I kind of explained some of the ones that work for me, but I think everybody has their own triggers when it comes to money, you know, so figure out some tools to objectify it. And any investing is good investing, you know, like just try to participate, you know, read a book. Even if you just read Rich Dad Poor Dad, like that is a fundamental, you know, a fundamental, like, complete change in how the average person, I think, would view capital and how it works. And then, you know, stop complaining on Facebook so much and start doing something.
Complain on Instagram more.
Instagram.
Put a nice photo with that.
Or at least say nice things as much as you complain. Then I'll read your complaints.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of, you know, agree with what both you said, and not only as a tool, but your relationship with money and kind of how you define it. Because I noticed Sam defines it as energy, and Jeff, for you, is capital, and for me, it's time that I can buy. And right, I think that may be a common point, that changing how you view it kind of allows us, at least all, to change how we interact with it and how we go about acquiring it and what we use it for in our lives. And I think the second thing with investing is there are endless opportunities. You're going to miss a lot of them, but you only need to be right a handful of times. So don't worry about anything you miss. Keep your eyes open. The more you learn, the more you'll see, and then wait until you truly understand the opportunity in front of you. And that's when you want to go ahead and act.
And I'm going to agree with what everybody said here, that again, when I discovered cryptocurrency, I'd already done some financial education because I had worked with money well. I'd run projects that made a little bit of money, or at least didn't lose that much money. And I still ended up putting a lot of money into group projects to help pay the people who worked with me. That giving of myself and having a basic understanding of money allowed me to create better artwork with more people. And I want to keep doing that. Also, within the last few years, I'm used to feeling younger than my age, and I've had some health problems that for the first time in a long time had me feeling older than my age. And I want to be able to be comfortable. I want to, like, give a gift to my older self of being comfortable and secure and having good health care. And I can't, who knows if I can rely on a job, who knows if I can rely on somebody else. So I want to look out for that for myself. At the same time, when I discovered Bitcoin, and I discovered that this can be fun. It can be interesting. And yeah, I lose some stuff and that sucks. I gain some stuff and it's temporary. But when I realized that you can enjoy this process, it changed everything for me. And I also think that it helps with this idea of abundance, and that you can grow this and you can give to other people. And that, I think, is really powerful. Then finally, the last thing, play around with a compound interest calculator. Go online, find one, play with the numbers. And I think that for a lot of people, that will really wake you up to what happens when you're not saving money, to when you're in debt, and to when you're investing.
I used to say that I hated money, and what has changed that to my feeling it more as a tool and ready to do what I can, what I think my brain is capable of, which may be capable of expanding to play the game of money, is that as much as we see problems with inequity and greed happening right now, and that is definitely a thing, I see money as what humanity came up with, so the currency isn't who was bigger and would kill you. So that as much as it seems like there is barbarism and predation with money, this was our way out of that. And I think the next step is like AI, and I have no idea what the world is going to do in a couple hundred years. The future is uncertain, but right now we're in a game where I can affect my values in this world so much more if I play this game and have these conversations and learn this stuff. So thank you all, gentlemen, for participating in this episode of the Paradialectic Podcast.
Yes. And I believe that we'll be back in 3 weeks. Take next week off. I'll be out of town the following week. So we'll be back with a topic yet to be announced in 3 weeks.
Okay. We could, yeah, let's not decide it.
We'll hold off on
But there will be a just investment one down the road
Yes.
with several of these characters. Cause I will listen as thoroughly as I can to that because I don't get it.
There we go. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.